When we talk about power, most of us picture flags, armies, and men in expensive suits sitting in rooms we'll never enter. We think power is about who has the bigger weapons, the larger economy, the louder voice. But history doesn't always work that way. Power has never just been about size, it's about nerve. It's about the courage to stand up when everyone else bows down. There was a time when the United States seemed unstoppable. Its influence stretched across continents. Its decisions affected the lives of billions. And yet, one man, a single Indian, dared to say no. He didn't have an army behind him. He didn't have nuclear weapons. He didn't have billions of dollars. What he had was something far rarer, an unshakable conviction that he was right and that no amount of pressure could make him bend. And that right there is the secret that turns ordinary people into legends. This man understood something that too many of us forget. Giants are not as invincible as they appear. They rely on the fear of those they try to control. They count on you to stay quiet, to stay obedient, to stay small. But when one person refuses, really refuses, the entire illusion starts to crack. It's easy to think, what difference could one person possibly make? But one person, standing firm, forces the world to respond. Think about what that means. The most powerful country on earth had to stop, listen, and reckon with the choice of one individual who simply would not surrender his principles. Imagine the courage it takes to do that. To look a superpower in the eye and say, I will not move. You see, power is never just about the size of your army or the reach of your economy. Power lives in the human spirit. It lives in the decision to stand when sitting would be safer. And that's why this man's story matters so much. Because it reminds us that the people who change the world are never the ones waiting for permission. They are the ones willing to risk something, to lose something, to face consequences, because they know that living without dignity, living without freedom, is a far greater loss. And let's be honest, it would have been easy for him to give in. It would have been easy to say, it's just me against them, I can't win. Most people do that. Most people look at the odds and back down. But he didn't. He refused to play by the rules written for him, and in doing so, he rewrote the rules entirely. That's what makes this story not just history, but a lesson. A lesson for every person who has ever been told to stay in their place, to know their limits, to stop dreaming so big. This man didn't just defy a nation, he defied an idea, the idea that power is reserved for the few. He proved that courage can outmatch control, that conviction can outlast coercion. And I want you to think about that for a moment, not as some distant tale about a man who lived far away, but as a challenge to you right here, right now. What are you letting control you? Who have you allowed to decide how much you are worth, how far you can go, how loudly you can speak? You don't need to be a president or a prime minister to shift the balance of power in your own life. You just need to be willing to stand for something, even if you stand alone. Because here's the truth, giants fall. They always have. They fall when someone stops fearing them. They fall when someone dares to take the first step, to speak the first word, to refuse the first demand. And the moment you realize that, you stop asking for permission and you start making history. So let this story remind you of the most dangerous truth in the world. Power doesn't belong to those who look strongest. It belongs to those who refuse to kneel. There's something extraordinary that happens when someone refuses to bow. The entire room shifts. The silence becomes louder. People start to watch, to whisper, to wonder what's going to happen now. Because defiance, real defiance, is rare. And when we see it, we can't look away. Most people are trained to compromise. We are taught from childhood to fit in, to stay agreeable, to not make anyone uncomfortable. We're told that going along to get along is how the world works. And so we shrink. We nod when we should shake our heads. We settle when we should speak up. That's what makes a person like this so unforgettable. He didn't settle. He didn't compromise. He didn't ask, what will keep everyone happy? He asked, what is right? And when he had his answer, he stood there, immovable. That's the kind of strength that shakes superpowers, because it's the one thing they can't buy, bully, or bomb out of existence. You see, the United States was used to people negotiating. They were used to leaders saying, well, we'll find a middle ground. We'll do what you ask. Just don't make things difficult for us. But this Indian man made things difficult. He made them pause. And in doing so, he forced the entire world to witness a new possibility, that you can look at the strongest nation on earth and say, no, that word no has brought empires to their knees. No, we won't obey. No, we won't sell out. No, we won't surrender what we believe. No, we will not be bought. And suddenly, the people who thought they had all the power realized they can't force you to do a thing without your consent. That's what this man did. He turned no into a weapon. Not a weapon of destruction, but a weapon of dignity. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted. But let's be clear, this isn't just about courage. This is about clarity. Because when you know who you are, when you know what matters, you stop getting distracted by the noise. You stop trying to please everyone. You stop giving away pieces of yourself to win temporary approval. That's what the U.S. didn't expect. They expected fear. They expected submission. They expected another leader they could pressure behind closed doors. Instead, they found someone who valued principle more than approval, someone who would rather stand alone than stand with the crowd in silence. And that kind of moral clarity, it's contagious. People start to see it and think, if he can do that, maybe I can too. It gives courage a face. It gives resistance a name. And little by little, the very power that once looked unstoppable starts to look fragile. That's the real magic of standing your ground. It doesn't just free you. It frees everyone watching you. It sends a message that says, you don't have to play by their rules either. And that's dangerous because once people stop kneeling, the system built on their obedience begins to collapse. So ask yourself, where have you been bowing when you should be standing? Who have you been trying to please at the cost of your own integrity? Because make no mistake, every time you bow to something that isn't right, you reinforce its power. And every time you refuse, you weaken it. This isn't just a story about one man and one nation. This is about a fundamental truth. Respect is not given to those who ask nicely for it. Respect is taken by those who demand it with their actions, who live in a way that makes ignoring them impossible. And that is the choice in front of every one of us, to keep bowing because it's safe, or to stand up because it's right, to keep playing small, or to make the whole world stop and pay attention. Because once you've stood tall, once you've tasted that freedom, you will never kneel again. The thing about courage is that it doesn't stay contained, it spreads. It spills out of one person's life and begins to touch others who thought they were alone. That is what happened here. This wasn't just one man making a stand. This was one man giving millions permission to make their own. When you see someone refuse to bow, something awakens in you. It reminds you of a part of yourself you may have buried. The part that wanted to shout instead of whisper. The part that wanted to fight instead of fold. The part that wanted to believe the world could be better than it is. Courage in that way is like fire. One spark can light up an entire horizon. And that is exactly what happened. His act of defiance became a signal, not just to India, but to the whole world. You do not have to accept the terms handed to you. You can resist. You can say no. You can demand something different. People watched him and thought, if he can stand against them, what excuse do I have? And that's how movements are born, not from committees, not from careful plans, but from ordinary people doing something extraordinary and letting others witness it. His courage didn't just inspire leaders, it inspired farmers, workers, students, mothers, fathers, people who thought they had no voice. And isn't that what terrifies those in power most? Not just that one person will rebel, but that everyone else will see it and start to believe they can too. That's when control slips through their fingers, because power at its core only works when people consent to it. Withdraw that consent, not with violence, not with chaos, but with conviction, and the entire system begins to shake. This Indian man's defiance became more than an action, it became a story. And stories are powerful. They travel faster than any army, deeper than any law, wider than any border. His story told the oppressed and the overlooked that they were not powerless. His story told the world that even the mightiest nation could be challenged. And here's the truth. That's what history remembers. Not the people who stayed quiet, not the ones who played it safe, but the ones who lit fires in the hearts of others. Every great movement you've ever read about started this way. One person, one choice, one act of refusal that said, no more. But here's what I love most about this story. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He wasn't chasing glory. He was simply doing what his conscience demanded of him. And that's what makes it so powerful. Because when you do the right thing, not for attention, not for praise, but simply because it is right, people feel that. They trust it. They rally to it. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. You never know who's watching you. You never know who is waiting for a reason to be brave, who is waiting for a sign that it's possible to live without fear. The stand you take today might be the thing that gives someone else the courage to take theirs tomorrow. That's how you change the world, not with one dramatic act, but with one act that ripples outward, creating more acts, more courage, more voices refusing to be silenced. That is the chain reaction of defiance. It starts with one, and it never stops. So don't underestimate the power of your own example. Don't think that what you do doesn't matter, because somewhere someone is watching, and your courage might just be the permission they've been waiting for. And that is how history shifts. Not all at once, not overnight, but one person at a time deciding to stand, until standing becomes the only option left. Because courage, once lit, does not burn out. It spreads, it catches, it transforms. And before long, what once looked like a lone act of defiance becomes a revolution that cannot be ignored. And this is where it all comes back to you. Because this isn't just a story about one man, one nation, one moment in history. This is a mirror. This is a question aimed straight at you. What would you do if it were you standing there? What would you do if the weight of the world told you to kneel? The truth is, most people spend their lives waiting for permission to be powerful, waiting for someone else to say, now you can speak, now you can rise, now you can lead. But the world doesn't work like that. Nobody hands you power. Nobody gifts you respect. You claim it. You earn it not by asking nicely, but by deciding you're done being small. That's what this man understood. He didn't wait for someone to tell him he was ready to challenge the most powerful nation on earth. He didn't wait for the odds to look good, for the risk to shrink, for the path to be clear. He acted because he knew his own worth. He acted because he refused to trade his dignity for comfort. And that's the choice we all face, whether to keep bending because it's easier or to take a stand because it's necessary. You may not be standing against a superpower, but every day you are faced with moments that ask, who are you really? Do you shrink or do you rise? Do you stay quiet or do you speak? Here's the thing, the difference between ordinary people and history makers is not that history makers are fearless. They feel the fear. They just move forward anyway. They know the risk, but they refuse to let it decide their fate. That's where real power lives, in the moment you stop letting fear be the loudest voice in the room. And I want you to remember this. The same strength that burned in him burns in you. You may not feel it every day, but it's there. You have the ability to refuse. You have the ability to draw a line and say, no more. And when you do, you might be surprised who follows your lead. Because here's the quiet truth about power. It doesn't just belong to presidents and generals and nations with missiles. It belongs to the person who decides they will not be moved. It belongs to the mother who refuses to let her child's future be stolen. It belongs to the worker who says enough is enough. It belongs to the student who dares to ask the hard questions no one wants to hear. And once you realize that, everything changes. You stop living on your knees. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop waiting for someone else to fight your battles. You stop handing your voice to people who haven't earned it. That is the legacy this man left us. Not just the memory of his defiance, but the reminder that you too can face down the giants in your own life. You too can choose principle over fear. You too can shake the ground beneath those who think they control you. But make no mistake, this isn't easy. It never was. Standing up will cost you something. It will make people uncomfortable. It will make you a target. It might even make you stand alone for a while. But that's how change has always happened, because someone was willing to pay the price. And here's what I promise you when you do it, when you finally refuse to kneel, you won't just change your own life. You'll change everyone who's been watching you, silently waiting for their own moment. That's how you turn defiance into destiny. So don't leave this as just a story you heard. Don't walk away admiring the courage of someone who came before you. Take it personally. Take it seriously. Let it light something in you that you refuse to put out. Because if one man can make the world's most powerful nation stop and listen, then what excuse do you have for staying silent? Stand, speak, refuse, claim your place. The world is waiting.